Good afternoon and welcome to the fourth webinar of the 2023 IHF Management and Wheelchair Handball Education Week, where leading experts throughout the world of handball, and not only handball, share their knowledge and experience over 7 days. My name is Adrian Costeu. I'm a member of the IHF media team, and I will be your host throughout all this week. And of course, to begin with, we have translations available because these sessions are all in English. We have translations available in French, Spanish, and Arabic. It's very easy to switch to your preferred language. Just click the bottom of your Zoom app. The interpretation icon is there. The globe icon, click on it, choose your preferred language, and then you will have interpretation there. All of these webinars fall under the umbrella of the IHF Education Center, which is available at ihfeducation.ihf.info. So if you want to rewatch any of the webinars in the IHF Education Weeks, you can go to ihfeducation.ihf.info and see them there. For Thursday, for today, we have another very interesting presentation, another interesting webinar. The topic is Good Governance Principles, and it is presented by James Carr, the Deputy Executive Director of the Association of the Summer Olympic International Federations. James, please, you can start your presentation. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Adrian, and nice to meet you all virtually. So yes, as Adrian says, I'm James Carr. I'm the Deputy Executive Director at ASOIF, the Association of Summer Olympic International Federations. And I think we've got about an hour today to talk about governance and the work that we've been doing. And I think there will be some time for some questions at the end. So if you just let me just set things up and share the screen, hopefully. Yep, so I hope that you can see that now, yeah?
Yeah.
Okay,
now
good.
It's your turn officially.
Great. Okay, then good. So yes, what we will do today is I'll do an introduction of ASOIF and also then do a bit of a rundown of our governance work over the last seven years, and then I'll summarize some of the findings from our recent governance publications, and then out with an explanation about how the International Handball Federation has scored, and highlight some of the best practices by the Handball Federation and from some other federations as well. And then at the end, I will just outline some next steps. If you just bear with me a moment, because I've got myself blocking the screen, I think. Hold on a moment. That's a bit better now. I don't have my own face blocking the screen. So just as an introduction to ASOIF, I'm conscious that some of you may not know who we are. ASOIF is the umbrella organization for the international federations that have a sport on the program of the Summer Olympic Games. So we represent the 32 federations that have a sport on the program of the Summer Games. We have a winter equivalent for those 7 sports on the Winter Games. Plus, there's also other international federation umbrella bodies, ARIFs and AIMS. And the international federations are one of the 3 main stakeholders, 3 main pillars of the Olympic movement. So with the International Olympic Committee at the center, there's the international federations as one arm. There's the National Olympic Committees, who I'm sure many of you work with, as the second part. And then, of course, the OCOGs, the organizing committees for the Olympic Games, with Paris next year, Milan Cortina, Winter Games 2026, and Los Angeles in 2028. So that's broadly how the Olympic movement, with those 3 parts, and the international federations being the part that we represent for the Summer Games. And just a little bit of history about us. So we were founded back in 1983 with 21 federations at that point. There were 21 sports on the program, the Summer Olympic Games then. So actually this year we're celebrating our 40th anniversary. And really we were created to focus on the common interests of our international federations. Now, there is a greater amount of variety amongst our members, which we'll come on to in a moment. But of course, there are lots of similarities, and we represent their interests vis-a-vis the IOC, WADA, International Court of Arbitration for Sport, and to represent that common position. And we have just in terms of our membership, many of those logos will be and names of federations will be familiar to you, some of them less so perhaps. And one of the things I always like to say on this particular slide is it captures the very wide spectrum of our membership. So with those, across those 31 members, of course, at the kind of top end, in terms of staffing, in terms of revenue, you have FIFA. That is our biggest member. Whereas at the other end of the scale, you have the likes of World Skate, World Archery, International Canoeing Federation, which are they're based here at the Maison du Sport in Lausanne, which is where I'm speaking from today. And some of those only have a handful of staff. So you can see with that spectrum of different shapes, sizes, culture, and history. Of course, they are all very different. It's a bit like a family. They've got the same kind of DNA, but they've each got their own character, which is important when it comes to governance and the work that we've been doing, because of course what might be right for FIFA might not be right for International Handball Federation, World Aquatics, or World Taekwondo, because of their capacity, because of their resources, because of the specificity of each sport. So I'd like to just get that message across. It's something that we, as an umbrella organisation, do have to be aware of. And just in terms of activities that we do, as I mentioned, we have representation in external organisations such as the World Anti-Doping Agency, International Testing Agency, the Court of Arbitration for Sport, and also Sport Accord, which is the kind of annual convention that will next take place in Birmingham in the UK. I should have said just at the top of the presentation that, as you might be able to hear from my accent, I'm British. I'm a lawyer by training, but I've worked in sport for a number of years now. Initially at the British Cycling Federation in Manchester, and then latterly at the UCI, the International Cycling Federation, before joining ASOIF back in 2016 rather. And some of the main projects that we've been involved in over those years, our governance work has been possibly our kind of flagship project, but other things that we've been doing, and all of these publications are available on our website. Back in 2019, we did an assessment about the future of global sport, how sport might look like in 10 years now with the disruption that we're seeing. Of course, making predictions is a very difficult job, and that was published in 2019. It certainly didn't foresee a global pandemic in the following year, but we tried to think about how the world was changing, and actually well-governed organizations were one of the recommendations there. Back in 2021, we published a report on gaming and esports strategy, and that was helpful for the federations, because that's a trend that we see. More and more federations are involving themselves in esports, and we're speaking as there's the Asian Games in Guangzhou in China at the moment, and I think esports is actually a medal event there. And then another report that we published a few years ago was about common indicators for the measuring the impact of events. So those are some of the projects that we've been involved in, but it's certainly true that the governance has been a big part of our work, and that's what we're kind of quite known for now. And really, I joined ASOIF back in 2016, and many of you will be aware, back in 2015 we had the scandals with FIFA, the police raids in Zurich, and also the scandals involving athletics. So it was a kind of a key time for sport, and also the international federation. So what we did as the umbrella organization was to set up a task force chaired by the ASOIF president, Francesco Ricci-Vitti, an Italian guy who was previously the president of the International Tennis Federation. And we tried to make that task force representative with governance experts, with representatives from sport, but also the public authorities and some academics who had experience of putting together a kind of a tool to assess sporting federations. Now, corporate governance is something that a lot has been written about, but given that sport and international federations, it's not exactly like kind of business in the traditional sense of the word. We felt that we had to tailor some of the tools and the indicators specifically for the international federations. So what we did was we came across we came up with a set of 50 indicators built around 5 key principles, and the first principle was about transparency. So essentially, what kind of things are you would you like to see for a transparent organization? And I know that there are quite a number of people online at the moment, and usually I kind of ask for people's suggestions for what kind of indicators would be good for transparency. But I know that there's a lot of you on screen, and it might get a bit messy. So we'll come on to questions at the end. But the kind of things that we identified were that, as you would expect for any well-governed organization, whether it's a business, whether it's a charity, whether it's a sporting organization, we like to see, firstly, that they have their rules, statutes, and regulations made public. And by that, we mean via the official websites. Websites are, organizations' kind of window on the world. That's where people go to find out information. So it's logical that that's where you find them. And one of the trends we've been seeing over the last few years is that a lot of effort is being made by sports federations to be much more transparent. You'll see. I'm not going to go through each of these points, but you'll see their elected officials with biographical information, annual activity report, and annual financial reports following external audit. These kind of things, they will typically be on a kind of inside section of the website, and frankly, not too many people will go and look to see the agenda or minutes of the General Assembly, but they are available for stakeholders who are interested in looking things up. And for example, you've got there the allowances and financial benefits of elected officials. Not many people are going to look it up, but it is there. The organization is being open about how it spends its money, and that reassures people that that things are being done in the right way. So those are the indicators, or some of the indicators, that we identified for transparency. And then the next principle that we thought about was integrity. And what we like to see here is ethical principles kind of underpinning things at the federations. And other examples, conflicts of interest policy, publishing decisions of disciplinary bodies. We have policies for safeguarding from harassment and abuse. That's something as an example of how governance changes over time. When we started this governance work back in 2016, safeguarding was not really spoken about, but with some of the scandals that we've seen in gymnastics in the United States, for example, more and more emphasis has been and attention has been put on that. So we put safeguarding as an indicator within our code. Similarly with data protection as well, there have been a lot of changes to data protection law over the last few years. So those are the indicators that we had for integrity. And then the next one, democracy. Democracy is that's a key part of international federations. They have elections for the president and typically a majority of members of all the executive bodies. But of course, elections have to be run in a correct, clear way, which is providing equal opportunities for the election candidates and a secret ballot as well, because otherwise, not to have that is we have seen causes problems, and over recent years there have been a number of cases that have gone to the Court of Arbitration for sport where there have been problems with the elections. Term limits for elected officials, that's something that we have seen a trend towards the introduction of term limits. It wasn't the case quite a few years ago, and some federations do still have them in place, including the International Handball Federation, I believe. But we do see more and more federations moving to that moving in that direction. Typically it is three terms of 4 years. That's the most typical model that we see amongst the international federations. We also like to see representation of key stakeholders, active athletes in governing bodies. Most federations do now have a presence of athletes, often with votes on their executive committees. Gender representation, you might wonder, how that fits into democracy. The answer is that some of these indicators could equally go in integrity section or whatever. Sometimes it's a little bit kind of artificial where the indicators go. And then the governing bodies meeting regularly. The executive board or the Congress should meet on a annual or at least biannual basis, so that there is that kind of scrutiny of the activities. So those are some of the indicators that we see on democracy. And then the next one, development and solidarity. I mean, historically, we have sometimes seen that the resources and money have been handed out to national member federations, and not too many questions asked. I mean, that was one of the problems at FIFA, I think, that money was being handed out, and rather than being spent on building facilities to promote and develop football, it was going into it was being misapplied or pocketed by officials. So this is the kind of thing that we're looking to prevent under this section, this principle, so that there's a transparent policy to determine the allocation of resources, that there's monitoring and audit process for the use of distributed funds. We also have in this section looking for education program for coaches, judges and referees, because of course every sport requires a team of judges, referees, technical officials, whatever it is in each respective sport, to interpret and apply the rules fairly. So education programs are important. The last indicator that we've listed there is about respecting principles of sustainable development and regard for the environment. Again, this is something that we see federations paying more and more attention to as societal demands change. The final section we call control mechanisms, and what we're talking about here is effectively kind of checks and balances to make sure that there are, or to try to mitigate against any abuses of power. And the kind of things that we're looking for here is to have an ethics committee with independent representation in case of any complaints being brought. External financial audit as well. I mean, all federations do that now and are typically publishing those audits, but to have an outsider come in and look at the financial figures, now, you know, audits are no guarantee that nothing's gone wrong. We've seen that in the corporate world. You know, the fall of you know, German company Wirecard, I think it was, they had gone under audit, and that doesn't guarantee to prevent abuse, but it's a good kind of way of trying to mitigate that. Other things that we like to see are open tenders for major commercial procurement contracts, and appeals process to the Court of Arbitration for Sport. So that's a kind of a fairly quick summary of the 50 indicators that we use as effectively a measuring device to assess the federations. And what we do with the governance task force mandated by our General Assembly, which meets once a year, we use that set of 50 indicators to evaluate international federation governance using that questionnaire. So the way that it works, we have a questionnaire with those 50 indicators equally divided. We ask the federations to complete a questionnaire with each of those indicators and score themselves on a scale of 0 to 4. So, you know, the 0 clearly is not fulfilled at all, up to a maximum score of 4. So we ask the federations to self-assess themselves and also provide some evidence. You can't just say, you know, I score 4 here, I score 4 here. You have to say, okay, well, you know, I think I score 4 for this particular indicator on publication of external audits, because we have published our external audits for the last 5 years and they are available on this link on the website. Therefore, I score a 4. And the way that we kind of check that is we have appointed an external governance expert to moderate those scores and independently evaluate those self-assessment questionnaires, moderate the scores, and conduct an analysis and report. You can see that, you know, if I was to mark my own homework at university or something, you know, might give myself 95%, whereas, you know, the examiner actually thinks, well, James, you know, you might think it's there, but actually it's more like it. Or equally, I might mark myself here, and the independent moderator, who has a kind of a broader view of things, says, you know, actually, I think a score up here would be more accurate and more appropriate. So that's the model that we use. It's a self-assessment by the federations, but there is an independent moderator to check things for consistency and then publish, write and produce a report. So just a little bit of history here. As I said, we've been working on governance for the last seven years. So we started the work back in 2017. And what we have done is we've conducted 4 reviews to date. We did the first one in 2017, second one just 1 year later, 2018, followed by one in 2020 and again in 2022. And so this is, you'll see just on the left there, that was the front cover of the 4th review of International Federation Governance, which is available on our website, and that was published in June 2022. And if I just move on and just illustrate the scores of the federations. So this is how the federations scored. Now, as I said right at the very beginning, with our 32 or 33 federations of differing shapes and sizes, you can, predictably, there is quite a wide range of scores with 50 indicators and a maximum of score of 4 on each. There's a theoretical maximum of 200. So you can see on this that there is one federation at the kind of top there that's scoring around kind of 100 and 190, and at the other end there's a federation of scoring kind of about 100, 105, something like that. So there is quite a wide variety of scores, but that is to be expected. And the other thing you'll notice from this graph is that we haven't identified the federations. We are a membership association, so although the media would like to see the names and the scores of the federations, we didn't provide them in detail, because our interest was in trying to nudge the federations to have improved scores. So on our first 2 reports, we just published an anonymized version like this. On our most recent 2 reports, we did provide a little a greater level of transparency to identify the federations in a slightly limited way. So those were the moderated scores back in 2022. We had set a kind of a target of 130 for our full members, and 120 for our associate members, those sports that were on the program just of the Summer Olympic Games in Tokyo. That's karate, that's sport climbing, that's world skateboarding, and surfing as well. And you can see that actually most of the members did achieve that 130 target. And we grouped the federations, the top performers in A1, second group A2, and then a B group, and then C group at the other end. And you can see just on this graph here that over the course of the last 7 years, there has been a real improvement across the board. So in this graph, so each federation is represented by four lines with their performance back in 2017 in blue, to their most recent performance in gold, whatever color it is. And you can see that the overall trend is upwards, and sometimes the difference is quite significant. I mean, obviously the federations that were scoring high right at the beginning, there wasn't that much ceiling for them to improve, whereas those federations at the other end, a lot of them have made some big advance. So we're very pleased with how things have gone. We're definitely not complacent, but the overall trend is good. And I mentioned that we published just a little bit more information about the federations, where they ranked in the groups, and that was partly because we felt that after 2 assessments, it was right that we were that little bit more transparent. And also because there was some kind of pressure from external pressure groups, and also the media, for us to be transparent about more transparent about our about the results. Now, as I say, we're a membership association, so we were not wanting to name and shame the federations, and what we decided to do was to identify them in groups. So some of those acronyms will be familiar to you, and you'll see that the International Handball Federation is in group B. So it scored somewhere between 100 and 130 and 150 points, and actually I think handball was towards the top end of that. So you'll see in the top group, FIFA was there, ITF, that's tennis, UCI, cycling, FEI, equestrian, and BWF is badminton. But overall, we were pretty happy with the progress that's been made, and some of the key findings that we saw was that I think it's like 98% of our federations now publish audited accounts, and that's a huge change from where things were back in when we started this work in 2015, 2016. At that point, it was only kind of 5 or 6. It is accepted now that federations have to publish their audited accounts. Many federations are publishing expenses policies, which is good. Gender balance, there's still quite a way to go there. Only 3 federations have an executive board with more than 40% composed of women, and actually 5 of our 33 federations have under 15% women on their board. So while progress has been made, there is quite a long way to go until we achieve equality. I mentioned term limits a little bit earlier, and 27 federations do now have term limits. Often they've been introduced as part of a wider package of reform. We noticed that was an increase on the situation in 2020 when there were 22 federations with term limits, and also mentioned earlier that more and more federations are paying attention to safeguarding policies, and sustainability is higher on the awareness. Other key findings were that many federations had held one online or hybrid General Assembly, partly because of the pandemic, of course, and I mentioned earlier about sometimes the problems that we see in the holding of elections, and we do now see that a good number of our federations have quite detailed campaigning rules for their candidates. So those are some of the key findings. I'd like to just go on now and just to identify some of the findings just in relation to your federation, or the sport that you're interested in. And yeah, as I said, handball did well at the higher end of Group B, with some significant improvements in important areas. Financial transparency is a strength, and continuing development of wheelchair handball, which I hope is something that you kind of feel that's correct. There's also a formal risk register that's being considered by the board, and the delivery of an online General Assembly. These are some of the things, the positives that we highlighted from handball, and actually handball achieved a number of kind of top 10s. So for each of the indicators that we have, we identified some of the best performers amongst our federations, and handball did perform creditably amongst some indicators. Transparency, for example, was a strength on the allowances and benefits. That financial regulations and the accounts provide a breakdown of costs of meetings and the compensations for elected officials, which is something that we like to see. There's also a good appeals process in case, and we've seen a few cases go to CAST, arbitration for sport, demonstrating that the system is working well, and judgments have been published. So these, I think, were some of the things that we applauded amongst the governance practices at the International Handball Federation. Looking just wider amongst some of the other federations, just some examples of some good good work. The Badminton Federation, they're doing some quite good work on gender equity and diversity. They've got a commission working on that. Some other examples that we've got, I mentioned about safeguarding being more and more important. So FIFA have got some quite interesting work in that area. That's partly as a result of some of the problems that they've seen in Afghanistan, in Haiti, I think. That's kind of prompted some action, but they're really doing some good work for that, as is the IOC in leading it. And then the UCI, they have an ethics commission that functions pretty well, and this is just a screenshot of a case that it considered some years ago about financial irregularities in some campaigning rules. Sustainability, I mentioned that is one of the trends that we see with federations taking greater initiative in this area, and world sailing, obviously a sport that's very closely associated with the natural environment. They're doing quite a lot of work in this area, and a few years ago, World Athletics, they published their sustainability strategy that's covering up to 2030. So that hopefully should just give you a little bit of an idea of some of the initiatives that we see at the International Handball Federation, but also across the board from other ASOIF members. I mentioned that standards have improved over the last 7 years, and that's definitely true. But we're certainly not complacent, and we will continue our work trying to foster that better culture of good governance amongst our members. And actually, it does extend into beyond, because the set of 50 indicators that we have come up with has also been used by our colleagues at the winter federations and also the smaller federations that are not on the Olympic program. It has almost become the kind of benchmark to assess international sports federations. So we are quite proud of the work that we've done, but of course it's down to the international federations who are deciding what next to do and what is most appropriate for their own particular federation, bearing in mind history, capacity, culture, capabilities, that kind of thing. In terms of next steps, actually, just later this month, we will launch our 5th review process. So I don't know, Amal, if you're still listening, but the questionnaire, the updated questionnaire, will be sent to the federations later this month for submission in January 2024. There will then be a moderation process with the report to be published early summer 2024, likely ahead of the Paris Olympic Games. And governance is changing, governance is evolving, standards change. So with that in mind, we've actually taken the opportunity to revise the code. We did have a code of 5 principles or 10 indicators built around 5 principles, and actually we're going to increase that to 60 indicators, meaning that there's 12 indicators for each principle, and to cover human rights, to cover athletes' rights, to cover audit standards, to put greater emphasis on these kind of areas. So that's our next step. We're not complacent and thinking everything's fixed. Things have improved, but we'd like to see that continuing and to prevent standards rising, but then falling again as the pressure has been taken off. The other thing that we're seeing is that more and more federations are taking putting greater priority on cascading better governance principles down towards their member national federations, because of course you're only as strong as your kind of weak, a chain is only as strong as your weakest link. So if one of those national federations has a governance or corruption problem, then that reflects very badly on the sport. So it's the international federations, it's in their interests to try to promote better activity amongst their members. Now, we're under no illusions. It is extremely difficult to do on a global scale. I mean, the International Handball Federation, it's, you know, it can't keep an eye on each of its 200 plus members, but some of the things that we see federations do is to have model constitutions, sometimes to conduct their own surveys of members to try to ensure that their own governance standards are as good as they can be. So I'm conscious that Adrian, that's a little bit shorter. You know, it's that was about 40 minutes, but I'm very happy to take any questions if we have any in the chat. If you could relay them, or, you know, I don't know quite how you work it. So Adrian, back to you.
Thank you very much, James. Of course, very interesting presentation with a lot of insight. Yeah, of course, there are some questions. And first of all, because this is the topic, right? And you've told us a lot, and you've gone into a big depth with the information. But how important is good governance for a sport in its federation, of course? Because if there is no good governance, the sport would suffer, right?
Absolutely, and that is, I think that comes to one of the fundamental points. It's a very good question, and I'm reminded of a phrase that I heard, that, you know, good governance is no guarantee of success, but bad governance is certainly a kind of almost guarantee of failure. And what I would say is that governance, you know, how things operate, how decisions are made, kind of underpins everything else, every other level of activity. It really kind of underpins it, whether it's marketing, whether it's legal, whether it's elections, whatever, finance. It kind of underpins things, and is likely to put a federation in the best possible situation to develop the sport. And what I mean by that is, you know, a federation is much more likely to attract interest from high quality host cities, high quality sponsors, broadcasters, if they are well governed. You know, I speak from experience here, in having worked for the cycling federation. You know, it's no secret that cycling has had a history of doping, and in the late 2000s, you know, the credibility of the sport was at risk. And, you know, in Germany, for example, you know, a major European economy, the decision was taken not to broadcast the Tour de France. Why? Because there was doubts about the riders, you know, and the feeling that they were all doping, that the sport was corrupt. And, you know, that's dangerous for the sport. Germany's a strong economy, a big sporting pedigree, and it wasn't being shown on domestic television. Now, I'm pleased to say that as a result of quite a lot of work, you know, not just on governance, but also on the doping side of things, that the situation is much better now, and it is being broadcast in that country. And it's just an illustration that you know, governance, it really kind of underpins things for that trust and the credibility of the sport. And frankly, you know, without that, it's just you know, it's kind of the professional wrestling in the United States, where you have kind of the sport running to a script, and it's, you know, more like kind of theater. And that's you know, that's entertainment in one way, but what we want to see is kind of fair competition and institutions that are conducting themselves in the correct way. I hope that tries to answer the question, Adrian.
Of course. Another question: we've had some presentations in the past days with social media, with marketing, and now with good governance. They're all like pieces of the puzzle to have a success, right?
Yep. Absolutely, absolutely. You know, there's so many different elements to the good governance. I mean, our questionnaire tries to acknowledge that it's built around the principles, but yeah, so many different aspects. And you know, I tried to get it across in the presentation. You know, every federation has to decide what is right and proportionate for them. You know, the Canoe Federation has only got 12, 15 staff. You know, they can't do the same as FIFA or World Athletics or, you know, the Tennis Federation. They don't have the same number of staff, and frankly, it would not be a good use of their resources to try to do that kind of thing. So yeah, it's always lots of different components and considerations. Yeah.
We also have one question. Of course, you've talked about good governance on an international level, but how important is good governance, and what can national federations do to improve this and themselves, of course?
Yeah, is that the email? Is that the question from? Is it Tabo from the South African?
So, yeah.
I see that just in the chat here, and yeah, that's a very good point. And as I said at the end of the presentation, more and more a greater priority is being given to, by international federations to improve the federation, to improve the governance of their national members, because you know, it is if something goes wrong at the US Gymnastics Federation, that reflects badly on the international federation and also the sport more widely. So we do see more and more federations putting resources in place. Sometimes it's model constitutions. Sometimes it's making sure that financial resources that are given to the federations are conditional upon the satisfaction. But there are lots of resources out there, and something I should mention is, well, two things actually. There's the basic universal principles published by the International Olympic Committee, which is worth looking at. And as you know, this is from the South African Handball Federation. You know, indirectly, the Handball Federation is a member of the Olympic movement, as a member of the International Handball Federation and also the South African NOC. So kind of two ways. There's the resources that the IOC publish, and also a number of resources on our website of best practices. So, for example, if you wanted to look up about how to improve how to improve your internal financial rules, or some examples of, I don't know, term limits or election rules, we have some best practices available on our website. There's also the International Partnership Against Corruption on Sport, which was initiated by the IOC and various intergovernmental bodies, and they've got a lot of best practices. So I would encourage you to look at our website and also the IPAC's website for some resources.
And one last question, James. You've told us, and you've shown us a lot of interesting data regarding a very good governance over the last years, an improvement over the good governance. Do you expect it to grow in the next years too?
Yes, I would. I think probably, you know, sometimes if you're coming from a kind of a low base, you know, improvements can be made quite a lot at the beginning. You might kind of term them kind of quick wins, and we did see quite a lot of progress in the first few years. But you know, if you're already at quite a high standard, you know, it's the law of diminishing returns, is it? A 100-meter athlete, you know, in their first couple of years of training will take a few seconds off their time, but you know, they're putting in a lot of work to shave off just the small little bit. So I do see some parallels there. And also, you know, governance is constantly evolving. I mentioned safeguarding. You know, it was not on people's radar 3 or 4 years ago, whereas now it is being prioritized. So yes, I do see it continuing. Some trends that I think might come in future is independent directors. We see that at a national level in certain countries. That might be something that that comes in. So yeah, I'm optimistic that standards will rise, but of course, you know, it gets more difficult the kind of as everybody gets to a high level.
Thank you very much, James, for your presentation and for your answers. We conclude this webinar here, but we are waiting for you tomorrow, once again at 13 CEST for another webinar in the IHF Management and Wheelchair Handball Education Week. Until then, goodbye. Have a nice day.